Great. Well, thank you all for our final budget workshop. And I think I was looking at it's 27 total meetings for the internal side of things. I think we had the full schedule going all the way back to November. And thank you to the whole budget team, all the department heads, the city councilors. I think we had 7 workshops or 8. What did we?
Oh, it feels like more than that.
Felt like it.
Huh.
It felt like it. But I know it's a lot of due diligence with this group, going through line by line by line by line, and really appreciate everybody's efforts. I know the last couple years I've noted Nate Burkhart, our deputy IT administrator, has just been absolutely essential to things. Again, he played a huge role in this, especially without a finance director. We're very close. I'll probably have an announcement next week on that. So we can have a little more firepower coming here, but this year, like the critical person, was Ashley Brown. She, we would have been completely lost without her on this entire process. Not just the keeping the log of all of the pieces and the good edits that the city councilors have made coming through here, but she's keeping the bills and the team of Deb and Leah. I've said it before, it's like a Wonka factory over there. I mean, they're just the busiest. It's just so much activity. She's up late. She's always super responsive, and and it's just we're so lucky to have her in this role in this department. So thank you, Ashley.
Yay.
Tonight, I as I noted at the beginning, I've kind of updated my memo on like where we're at in the organization, in the budget process, some of the main cost drivers, and what we're seeing here, not just for this budget cycle, but the previous one and into the future. I think it's always really important to have context and really kind of analyze not just the budget itself, but how it's stacking up over time and where it's going. So I'm going to try to put up here the the budget memo I have, and I passed out a copy to all of you. Sorry. I'm going to see if I can share it so that at least if folks that couldn't make it and some city councilors, that they can at least watch online. So just give me 1 second. All right, let me see if I can open this up. And I apologize, it's obviously been an extraordinarily busy time, but I haven't quite been able to get, I usually like to do a triple check of the math and figures, but after I do my kind of general budget memo, we're going to go into some of the final figures, so the last cut exercise that I did with the department heads, just to whittle down anything that could be even remotely discretionary in this budget. That's not in the restricted accounts for TIF and economic development. And then we'll go through that. Scott's got a fire department potential request that we'll need to consider, and I think kind of, in some ways, is like a microcosm for this entire memo is that issue, the issue that we're facing in the fire department for staffing, and then all of the cut exercises. I just spent, an entire week with staff, and another pass of a 500-page line by line going for. So I call this memo Boom and Gloom. Because that's really the story of where Ellsworth's at right now. The boom is real. It's growing at a rate that very few communities in Maine are experiencing, especially rural Maine, especially northern rural Maine. The tax base is expanding dramatically. New housing, new businesses, new hotels, new commercial activity, massive state and federal public investments in the city, renewed interest in developers and employers, and incredible amount of momentum, but the gloom is also very real, and the kind of pressures all of that growth is putting on city staff, city resources, and it really kind of affected this year's budget. It was not like, let's take a list of the new discretionary programs, what we want to invest in. It was really saying no to everything, cutting even previous year's yeses even further, and we're still at like a 7 to 8% increase depending on where we fall here. So a little bit of a broader kind of look back on, 36% population growth since 2000. That's one of, if not the fastest growth rate of any city in Maine, 3.5 times the statewide average, a $700 million valuation growth since 2021, and that's after almost a 12-year anemic growth cycle for the city of Ellsworth. So that's what this taxable value and rate table kind of shows, both the tax rate in the dotted line, and then you have the mill rate from 14 to 19 on the right here, and the total taxable value of the entire city back to 2009. So this green line you can kind of see, 2009 to 2021, pretty much no valuation growth whatsoever in the city. I might say no, $100 million over a 12-year period of time. Effectively, that's not very much growth at all. And then the pandemic hits, and we see an explosion in valuation growth. And this is based on our assessor, but also the state's valuation of the city. So $700 million increase in a very short period of time, and correspondingly, you have some pretty substantial drops in the mill rate, down to 15.66 from a high point, of almost 19 just a few years ago. But that's not the whole story, obviously. The cost of government, the levy, has also been fluctuating a lot. You really, the taxable value, you can see kind of changes haven't happened, and all of a sudden you really start to see like these kind of heart attack shocks in value and kind of levy changes. You have a 2023, the year before I arrived, it's probably FY24. You see a 17.5% increase in the tax rate. It's an enormous tax change that year. I think Steve was probably the only counselor that was here at that time. And it's hard to say, though, that they were just wildly spending. I think actually, if you look back, how did they have almost no tax rate change in the levy from 2022 and 2023? And the answer is during the two highest inflationary years since the 1970s in an entire generation, and not the cost of everything didn't increase. Like, no, the answer is, and I think we've talked about this in the past, Steve, and I think a few other counselors, is just if you take a longer look back evaluation with these spikes of 17% in 1 year. So the rate of increase has been slowing. I came the first about halfway through the budget cycle. It was about 7.5 that year. Last year, and this is the combined school and city side year, we're a little less, we're about in the 4% category. And that's comparatively pretty favorable in a few ways. One is Ellsworth at a percent of the median tax burden is about 4.73%. Of the service centers in Maine, that's a pretty low level.
How is that calculated, Charlie?
They take the median income for the city, and then the median and the percent of a tax on the median home value. So
Okay.
the Ellsworth American did a pretty good story on this last cycle. Obviously we're waiting for a lot of, we'll be able to refresh this data at some point in time.
But this is as of last year?
Yeah, and then I have one for the mill rate too. I think I might have accidentally taken that slide out. But the mill's pretty low too in terms of the 15.66. I think we're like second or third lowest of any of the service centers in cities in Maine. So that's kind of the boom part. You're looking at a pretty comparatively low tax rate, a ton of growth, adding about $500,000 a year just in like new businesses, commercial and residential being built, new homes being built, new businesses being built, new hotels being built, new tractor dealerships being built, new gas stations being built. There's just so much being built, and over did analysis previously for the chamber, it's about last 3 years, it's been about $500,000 just in new tax revenue from the new things being built. That's not the valuation change. That's just those new things. The valuation changes have been a different story. I think one of the things that I found interesting, and I read the Ellsworth American story recently about 31% increase on property taxes and for waterfront and 18 residential, and it seemed to be like, yes, that's the assessment change that happened, but that's not a tax increase of 31% that the council or myself like that. We don't have any control over that piece. And it got me thinking, if there is a 31% tax valuation change in some of the, like, what is the effect on the overall tax base of that? So I worked with the assessor and just said, hey, can you pull those rates for me? And was kind of shocked. For the around 5,500 tax bills that went out for 4,000 unique owners, 75% of the tax bills went down last year. So out of the 5,500 tax bills, 75% was a tax decrease. And it wasn't a big decrease, like $15.
But it wasn't an increase.
No, it was 75% of the tax base in Ellsworth last year had a tax decrease on their bills. But I know that's also not a good thing because the city costs for schools in the city were about 4% up 4%. I think it was about 1.5 million in total of that new cost compared to the previous years, and that was all placed on the 25% of the highest value in the valuation change. So you can see why that would be like and again, that's the city council, the city manager. I'm not able to. If I had my druthers, I would not have a tax system that allows for that type of unanticipated valuation changes. And that's been borne out. That's the assessor looks, and there's been, you saw that $700 million in growth. I think there was sort of a, hey, is this real? Will this last? Will it stabilize? But if you don't keep up with your valuation changes from the state claws back funds for a variety of things because they look at you as a growing tax base, a growing revenue base, and that other states that are not growing, or cities and towns that are not growing as fast as you, don't deserve as much revenue sharing, don't deserve a school sharing, and so they can claw those pieces back. I thought that there might be 5% of the tax bills went down last year. I was not expecting 75% of the tax bills in Ellsworth last year to be a net decrease. I don't, we're going to get into valuation. We split that as part of the process this year. I think that was one of the tough things. Last year we were expecting a 5% across the board valuation change. We kind of put some initial mill rate assumptions into the budget, and then it turned out to be 31% on the waterfront, and it just totally skewed the distributions. So we worked really hard this year just to, hey, I'm going to notice it would be 3% across the board. We'll see if that ends up being the case, and the mill on a 7% change in the budget, if that moves forward, that would probably be up a little bit on the mill, but still in the 16s range. But until that commitment is finalized, and we are on track to get the commitment finalized very soon.
Good.
We'll send out bills ahead of time so people know their valuation changes before they hit their tax bill, because that's what's happened last. The tax bill has been late 6 years now. We're going to get those tax bills out on time, and we're going to have beforehand, we're going to send out notifications that your valuations and which the commitment was based on are now live, so people can say, okay, this is how much my property changed in value. I do feel like I know our senator has been looking at the property structure and the system in the state of Massachusetts, but this system is, to me, being able to have that type of thing is, and that kind of change, and then it affect just a quarter of the tax base, has that kind of addition versus the 75% that are effectively flat. I think that needs to be looked at over time so that people don't have these fluctuations. So, and also the gloom is about where the growth areas, where our biggest growth hits to the budget. It's one of the things that's been tough this one, saying no to everything, not backfilling 2 employees, one in code, one in the Parks and Rec / Public Works area, pulling back, everything I possibly could that was discretionary, that's not in a restricted economic development account. We're still up 70%, so. The big piece is in the public safety area. That's up about $600,000, $660 or so. That's and that's not with adding anybody in public safety. That's just true costing what the public safety departments are costing. That's been, we've went to a full EMS service. So the fire department has been diligently adding 2 people a year, I think, for the last 5 years. Last year was the last time to have the addition. We're seeing a lot of the kind of the pay structures and the collective bargaining agreements and like, this is what it costs. We're not trying to add anything there, and this is best-in-class service. This is also, I want to be a strong stamp, and I do not think that it's one of the hard things about this is, like, these are collective bargaining agreements. We are a massively growing city. We need fire and police to continue to grow, but this is a big part of where our costs are. Same thing goes into the employee benefits, just for the people we have, actually two less, due to the collective bargaining increases and just employee benefits across the board increases, you're up 500,000. Just a couple subcategories. These are not additive, by the way. They're just.
I had questions,
so
so that's good.
So health insurance is up about 200 grand as part of that employee benefits. That's 17%. The Maine State Retirement's up 100 grand. There was some state reimbursement corrections issues which you talked about. We had some mistakes in the assessing of some personal property tax, or maybe some business property, where essentially the state had to claw back almost $200,000. So that really, we're also down negative 5.9% on our revenue expectations over the previous year. So we have increased costs like this. Revenue expectations are down 5.9%. And part of the reasons is that they're clawing back some of the money we did owe them, but there were mistakes. And again, as we talked about a lot when we talked about the revamp of the assessing department and the need for a consultant and where we've gone there, that's a big part of it. A lot of valuation growth, a lot of change, a lot of pressures in the system, and mistakes start happening, and they can be of that category. Road debt service, so all the roads it was really needed. Probably 3 or 4 years of backlog and not a lot of roads being done, and that's we paid for them. We had a long discussion on don't do debt service on them for longer than their useful life. I think Councilor Harrigan, you rightfully noted it's about 7 years, and we put it in there for a 7-year repayment. If we would have done this over 30 years, we could have had a lot less of a debt payment, but 5 city managers from now would still be paying off the debt on those $2 million in roads. So it's the fiscally responsible way to do it. But that still meant a $400,000 increase. That's in the highway budget. We're actually looking at next year. That's not exactly a highway expense. I mean, we might pull that into a general area. And a lot of other things. I should note here too, salt is up, I think it was 13%, and we buy $170,000 worth of salt. Plow steel is up. So all the inflationary things that we're seeing that are climbing up, like governments are even more prone to some of those items. Gas, we buy a ton of gas. We buy a ton of health insurance. Health insurance up 17%. Salt, even like liquid calcium, it's a 100% increase this year. The road striping, which we have to do, and we did get a lot of bids, up 47% for the road striping over the previous year. These are not things that I, want to, if I could cut any of that stuff without pretty dramatic service or lack of stripes on roads during the year, I would love to do that type of thing. I would love to not have to salt the roads or to pay that amount of increases. But these inflationary increases that we're seeing are pretty dramatic. We also said no to just about everything. No to the Emerald Ash Borer Pest Management Plan, deferred. No to the new IT position, despite the fact that they have enormous pressures. No to Council Chamber AV upgrades, even though we get complaints about it all the time. No to any video conferencing. A lot of our systems are pretty old, and they don't really work anymore for video conferencing. The televisions, we didn't backfill a code enforcement assistant. We didn't backfill a Parks or Rec / Public Works employee. In fact, we added a public works director last year, but we really just shifted resources and from highway to Parks and Rec. So public works is down a lot, and Parks and Rec, still doesn't have enough manpower for a lot of the deferred things they have. We cut heavily, and we'll go through this on my last round on HR training, professional development. It really hurt me to do that because we have such a new staff. We had so much turnover. I did this with the department heads, less than a year, probably 6 months ago. Like, who's been here since 2019? It was one person in their role. And that some people have been here longer than that, but they haven't been in that role as a department head since 2019. So cutting people's training, who are pretty new to really important jobs. And we talked about planning. Yes, we had a title change from one of the planning, but there's been 2 people in planning for a while. There's 2 people in planning now. Bar Harbor, I think, has 5. So the staff is under real growth pressures in the smallest parts of government. And that's kind of my next piece, like cutting the smallest parts of government, general government, training budgets in the smaller pieces to try to slow the increases of the largest parts of government in, in the public safety departments, and then even bigger increases in the school side of things is just not, it's not sustainable. It's not, you're not going to just, it's not a good math equation. This is a breakdown just so folks, know what makes up those tax bills that get sent out. Roughly, and this is from last year, we're looking at around 17 million for the schools. When you get your, there's around 29 million in like with the total taxes that are collected each year. 17 million is out for the schools, and about 12 million is for the city side. And I think I don't know if I have that chart here. I had another chart of school versus city spending and percent increases over the last 6 years, and the city's been underneath the school increase, every year. That's why this is growing. This pie on the school side of the contribution. And also, I looked into this. I was kind of hoping that, wow, the school spending is just like, it's really squeezing out the city, but we spend some of the lowest per pupil spending on the schools in the state and the region. It's not that. It's just deferred investments in the schools, and their stuff is costing a lot more money too. So it's really hard to take the smallest portions of city government, squeeze every penny out of them, and make up for increases in the largest portions of city government. Infrastructure, this is something we're going to continue to work on. We have this new SIP plan that we're working through for the city not having really a full inventory of all the different maintenance on infrastructure that's happened over the past 6 years, which was really the last time they had a comprehensive capital improvement plan. I know Sarah's done a initial presentation. We're going to keep that. Unfortunately, this budget meeting, there's a little bit of a break in July. We don't have workshop the first week in July, but August, we're going to be back into it for capital improvement planning and a lot more activity there. But it's, about $20 million in year one deferred maintenance. It doesn't mean we're going to bond ban for $20 million. We can't. But we're going to have to do some really hard, decisions there. It's tough, but now we know what all the cans that have been kicked before, and the cans that we're going to kick, and the cans we're not going to kick anymore. And those are hard conversations. They're going to need to be honest conversations. Financial controls and modernization not being optional. We're continuing to make this a much, much more robust system. As those who were here, I think Steve and I don't know if Nancy and Patrick were here when the first. Was this your first budget, or had you guys been here the year prior? Oh, I guess you were here.
You came into our first
We were
budget.
experiencing it ahead of your arrival.
That's right. So you guys were already halfway through a budget cycle where they were just tossing Word documents and random pieces of paper at you.
And getting mad if you asked questions.
Getting mad if you ask questions, and like no tracking, no prior year actuals.
I have that same problem. People get mad when I ask questions. Imagine that.
Just the way you ask them, Steve.
Yeah.
So we continue to move forward on a lot of these pieces. Transparency is a big part of it, and it's a value of mine and the entire team. Sometimes you get punished for transparency, and that's okay. We publish a draft version of this budget, all 570 pages, every single line item, every single year-to-date actual. I've done that in my last 3 cycles. We get tough questions because we provide so much transparency on the data, on the projects we're doing, on the workshops. And it's interesting to me sometimes, sometimes it can be a little boisterous, and people can, yell about different programs and different things. And for me, I love it. I was actually talking to somebody recently. I'm like, how do you stand that? It's like, you just got to be the chair. They're not yelling at you. They're yelling at a chair named city manager. And if you can do that, you can still listen to somebody when they're yelling at you and be like, yeah, you know what? Maybe that downtown restroom isn't a good idea for TIF funding and economic development. Maybe it is. Let's hear from some more business owners. Maybe we should spend more of that on roads. There's not every road is eligible for TIF funding, but some of our roads are. We're doing Bayside Road with a $750,000 match, and those are the types of weights with those funding projects we need to think of. What does make me upset is when people sloganeer and say, oh, well, this thing's a slush fund and you're like using that. It's like, well, we have to spend those on economic development activities. They're restricted funding for those purposes. That is the law, and we can also change that, but that takes a city council eliminating those TIF districts. So, it is not spend $39,000 in a downtown restroom or lower people's taxes by $39,000. The real honest answer there is it's either $39,000 of that tax sequestered funding, that's 59 cents a dollar on that project, or another type of economic development project, but it has to be things that continue to grow the tax base. We also, while there's a lot of gloom in here on those types of pieces, we have a pretty full stack of of project management. Some through TIF and economic development funding, ordinance rewrites so we can be more business friendly and continue this growth pattern is on digital modernizations of systems that have been paper based for decades and really create issues when you have critical staff turnover. The water treatment plant replacement work, which is just coming at the proper time, which is fully funded through grants and low interest loans that people have been working on for quite some time now. The assessing modernization, which we started up last year and is really coming to fruition. Capital improvement brand, Bayside, our great, very small Parks and Rec team. I know Patrick, when you joined, the slides, years before they could fix. Knowlton Park, or the splash pad, they didn't winterize it, so we lost a bunch of the jets. That stuff's happening now. I was walking out there with Roddy at the splash pad this year, seeing his opening plan. We're going to take care of our assets. We're going to take care of our parks. The Knowlton Park does not look like a completely rundown facility anymore. The marina is looking a lot better. These are, we take real pride in these places, and our teams take a lot of care of them. I think at some point in time, revenue options for long-term sustainability has to be looked at. You see those cost increases, and I sure as heck don't want to cut police or fire. I do not. They're absolutely needed. I was actually talking to some people in the library today because I go hide there because when I really need to do a project and I don't want staff knocking on my door. And then I can't help myself.
Secrets out.
I talked to them, and I was talking about some of these problems and increases in public safety and some of these other things, and like there's nothing left to squeeze. We just did a cut exercise, by the way, like to have everybody take any training piece, anything that adds an absolute requirement of your license to pull it out, except for the library. They pinch every penny over there. They are extremely fiscally disciplined. They were the only department that was exempt from that exercise. Did they still? Yeah, this is the kind of teams that we have over there. And then I was talking about some of the costs, and they said, "Oh, that's really tough." And they're like, "But we can't cut fire police. Even the folks that that don't make a ton of money, then they're probably some of our lowest paid employees over at the library. They understand how important our public safety groups are. They're best in class. We need them every second. We've had a few tragedies and emergencies, both in the police and fire side lately, that have really shown you that when these folks are more expensive, but they are worth it. So if we're going to look at some of those cost increases and how we're going to get tax bills back down, it's not going to be on the general government side, on the smallest side with the least amount of growth. It's going to have to be some more structural changes, looking at fees, which we've already started doing in the short-term rental area. Solid waste, it's a $400,000 loss to the city every single year. It should be an enterprise account where the users of just like water, just like wastewater, where the users of those services pay for them. It's right now,
That's why I mentioned that we should have increased the tickets and the scales.
We did.
We did.
And
We could have increased it even more, so it was supposed to be pay as you go anyways.
I think we are gonna.
And it needs to be that way, and it's just like the water department. That when they took that over, really, I remember when they took it over, and it was like, and that's supposed to be ratepayer driven.
Yeah.
And that's what it was supposed to be. Bad problem is they didn't wait until finally the water company says, here, take it. We're not even gonna sell it to you. Here, just take it, you know? But no, they had to jump on the gun and buy it back then. So there's a lot of mistakes way before any of you get a chance to get in and play in the game. They've done a lot of things over and over the years.
Yeah, Sarah actually we talk about that a lot. It's just
Yeah.
like how much of this deferred and just like how long it's going to take. We're 2 years in, at least from my side, to this turnaround. We've made a lot of accomplishments, but we got a long way to go. I think it's a guy named Pavel in was it Yugoslavia or something. He gave like a speech when he became president there. And it's a famous speech because he basically said, hey, we have real big problems. A lot of politicians will just come in here and just sing you sunshine and fairy tales about how easy it's going to be to just make everything turn around. Like, no, that is not the case. I think that's kind of one of my pieces here too, is just this public process, some of the misinformation I'm seeing out there, and the need for seriousness in addressing these problems. I can't tell you.
You know, I know that there's gonna be a lot of department heads, I know there's gonna be a lot of employees, and I know that there's gonna be a lot of people out there in general, they're going, oh, you're nitpicking. Well, you know, look, you know, if you don't wanna cut staff, you've already made improvements in the equipment the staff has. You see what I mean? Where else can you find a little bit more to cut?
Yeah, and the thing is, it's not a little bit more. If we're going to get it down to more
You know,
inflationary levels,
But there are
it's-
departments out there that we can make changes, you know?
and that's kind of the piece too to me that, you know, having been through this budget 4 times, having gone through it with you a 5th time, having worked with all the department heads to try to find every piece, saying no to absolutely everything and to still be at this level is disheartening. And some of these revenue pieces are going to be politically fraught as well, to look into, whether it's parking kiosks just seasonally for non-Ellsworth residents, some of the larger state and federal grant matching, which takes time to really figure out and to get them on board and isn't guaranteed. Georgia has a floating local option sales tax, which the floating part of it is you could do a 1% sales tax. Ellsworth does 500 million, in retail sales, the highest per capita in the state. A 1% floating option sales tax on that would deliver about $5 million a year into city coffers. But the floating part is it has to go directly back to the property tax owners or the payers. You can't use it for new things, you know, I would only consider something like that if it also was matched to all that revenue generated from local option sales tax, which is a lot of tourists. It would have to go back to the property tax owners, and it would have to be matched by any city or town that would do something like that. That they'd have to be at a 3% level and are never allowed to go beyond it without losing that option. Because that's the only way I think you could actually have true fiscal responsibility for that. But in the latest tax reform agendas, nobody's considering that. I heard that the last time they looked into that, a bunch of state legislators got unelected, and I know a lot of business groups
And
oppose
the
that.
business community was opposed to it.
Yeah.
Multiple times.
So, that's likely not there. The data center is another area where if a $500 million data center came into town on a 15.66 mill rate, you're talking $7 million a year in tax revenue on that. Yes, there could be a lot of environmental impacts, but those kind of things, 1% local option sales tax, a $7 million increase to revenue from a data center, you're talking $1,000 average tax bill decrease with those. Those are your only two silver bullets, and they're not. They might not even be silver. They might be rusted. People are not going to be happy about them. But if you're looking for the one option that's going to solve the whole thing, it's going to have to be a ton of different things. And that's why I'm going to talk about seriousness and misinformation. And I've been there. I used to work in politics. Just cut the waste. I used to work for a politician. The State House in Massachusetts. We got all these cans of fluff, peanut butter fluff. We put big things of fluff, and you got to cut the fluff from state government. And it was a fun event. But I think from a federal level, if you just kind of have this, Republicans will cut the waste and we'll all be in a low tax paradise of government spending, and that's wrong. And Democrats have it wrong. You just tax the rich, and we'll all be in a paradise of land of plenty, and there won't be any economic development, business growth. No way. Both those things are lies. It is much more complicated, much more collaborative, much more weighing tough trade-offs, much more. And I hate to say it, but when I worked for Governor Baker in Massachusetts, this was one of his biggest successes as a Republican. Was no drama, no blaming the other side. If I'm going to take some tough things as on my side as a Republican, and I was a Republican political appointee and spent 10 decades in Republican campaign politics. The other side's, if I'm not denigrating them, they'll give some too. And then you can figure, and when you're in that kind of environment and you're collaborating and you're having honest questions and dialogues about where we want to go as a community, you can accomplish something. If it turns to sloganeering and tax the rich or just cut the fat and its slogans, you're out the window. Which is why I also think that we need some, I've talked to a few people about this, not actually in Ellsworth, but friends of mine who work in other municipalities. And I think we need some sort of audit or budget commission made up of business owners in Ellsworth and some very expert financial people to really start looking, not just this year, and hey, we'll cut all these things this one year, and then, all the inflationary things we just talked about, all the collective bargaining increases that are locked into our laws, will wipe out that decrease from that year one. It can't just be a year one discussion. It's got to involve a much more holistic approach of people that can look at this and I hate to say it, but be outside of even the council, because that can be a more apolitical analysis that moves forward. I don't know exactly how to operationalize that. I'm going to look into that more, but I really feel like something like that is going to be needed if we're really going to look towards long term with all the gross pressures on the city, with some of our major cost centers increasing to levels that are really not sustainable, and the solutions, the easy solutions of cut around the edges to keep up and don't touch the big cost centers. It's just not going to work out. We've got to figure out different things. But I also have, I'm very optimistic. I think in that same piece, these are problems because it has opportunity. Like these are being created by all these opportunities. Like, this is not on track to be Millinocket or some of these other places where they literally just start cutting everything and then it creates a vicious cycle where the roads fall apart. I mean, that really is the true cut scenario that will really save taxpayers a lot of money is, cut the police, cut the fire, cut general government, cut investments in roads, cut investments in schools. Those are all things that those places in rural parts of Maine have had to do. And go drive around those cities and towns and see how many of those people's kids and grandkids are coming back to those cities and towns, and what are their population levels looking like, and what are their schools looking like. Considering some places like we don't offer a bus to school anymore. Those are the types of things that would have to be under consideration if you go that route and just have a massive tax decrease. So we have a lot of growth. We have a lot of great local organizations that are willing to do whatever it takes to kind of come together to meet this moment. And I'm super excited about that. Even with a lot of this kind of gloom and the budget pressures this year. It's an honor to be city manager here. I'm excited to hopefully have a new finance director, so I don't have to do this process and for the fourth time. And can
Did
get
you find one?
the final scores just came in from the committee, so I'll talk more next week. But I hope to have an announcement once those scores come in. I obviously have to talk to the final list and then see
You
if
gonna
they-
be happy about it? Okay. Well, she's not going anywhere,
I was
right?
on the committee, so,
Yeah. Yeah.
And Charlie, I think just to reinforce your point about finding solutions, there was an economic development plan for the state of Maine 10 years or more ago, and it talks about silver buckshot. There is no silver bullet. It's silver buckshot. It's a little bit everywhere. So that's what we're
State
working on
man.
here.
Oddly
I'm
enough,
sorry, I don't mean to giggle.
one of the jobs I turned down to come here was in the final round of interviews to be the Economic Development Implementation Director for the state of Maine. And they showed me that plan, and the question was like, hey, how can you operationalize tracking if this plan's actually working? Actually met with somebody from DCD, and they asked our mill rate, and I said 15.66, and literally that person's jaw dropped. And it's like, she's like, I thought you were gonna say 24. Like, and that's another big piece of this, like the way when the school talked about school revenue sharing might change. That could be a silver bullet too. Obviously, you saw the school growth increases, but if that dynamic changes in how the state does revenue sharing for our schools, that will really help make these more inflationary
I
levels.
was reading about that today, so it's not in effect for 2027, but it is for the following year, so.
Yeah,
we
so
can start
how-
looking at it.
That one I'm really, really hopeful for. I know
Yeah.
I think it's a massive, and not just in the schools themselves, but the buildings and how those investments go from the state. It's very interesting. But yeah. So now we're gonna switch to the details.
Is this available to the public, Charlie?
I'm gonna
Yeah.
like my one last thing is I always like to quadruple check all my dates and figures and make sure I didn't carry something over. I just saw a couple mistakes I already made. So yeah, I've got to do that. But for the final budget, I'll put it in there. And also, I want the actual final figures too that we decide on. So with that, any more questions about kind of the macro before I get into the micro?
Yeah, that's a good overview, thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you.
I have a few comments that I'd like to make. You talk about where do you do income, where do you do expenses? Now, this is probably the city of Ellsworth is not facing anything different than other cities. Everyone's household income is strained, every government budget is strained, every need is strained. But eliminating paper clips out of the closet isn't going to solve anything. Just sitting here thinking, on the agenda, you have many positions that you're going to appoint. It's number 19 on the agenda that came out. You need to cut those positions. You've got to take a hard look at that. You got too many people steering the boat and not enough people rowing the boat. You want to get into the meat and get rid of the personality things. It's very simple. Personnel is the biggest place that you can make an impact and cut. Is it fun? No. But sometimes it has to be done. And number 19 on the agenda talks about city manager appointments. There's some big numbers in there that need to get looked at about eliminating some management positions so that you can have more people rowing the boat. It's not a fun topic. Nobody wants to say that. You talk about getting business people together, they're going to tell you that. That's where the big thing is. You have to eliminate positions to make a difference in the budget. It's not fun. Who wants to lay somebody off? Nobody wants to do that. But we have too many positions that have been created in this city that we could try and get done without. I know that's not popular, but you're talking about money. You're talking about Mr. and Mrs. Ellsworth's money. That needs to get looked at very hard before all those appointments are made. Eliminating some tough positions. You need more people rowing the boat. Also, since I've been here, this sewer fiasco down on Water Street, you got all kinds of trucks delivering sewer from out of town. There's a great chance to take in some money to benefit the city of Ellsworth and not cost the city of Ellsworth money. I'll repeat, when I got here, I was told this was an enterprise account and they were making money. I cracked the books that was 2 years old and they were losing $460,000. Trucks coming from Milo and Old Town, driving right by the Brewer facility. How come they're driving by that facility? They're driving by that facility because they can pay their people to come to Ellsworth because the tipping fees are less. You need to do some market pricing. Everybody dumping sewer at the sewer department needs to pay the same amount. All these side deals that some guy pays this amount, some guy pays that amount, some guy pays this amount. That needs to get regulated. You
What
want to
side
make
deals
sure.
There's no side deals.
You can look at a video of
There
former
is
city
all
manager Chair
kinds of
Michelle Beale
side deals.
talking this
Not everyone
conversation with
pays
Steve.
the same to dump a gallon of sewer
You're
in
just
that
making
plant.
stuff up.
No, I'm not making stuff up. If you look fine enough, you'll find, and there'll be a recording of a meeting when I questioned that. Why is this guy paying X amount of cents? And, well, they're giving us more. Everyone that dumps sewer at the city of Ellsworth out of a truck needs to pay the same amount. It should not be all over the place.
Does the
I looked
sewer
at that.
enterprise account impact our budget in any way?
No, and, former city manager and former city council chair Michelle Beale tried to explain this to Steve previously. As they've talked
Yeah,
to our
they-
wastewater superintendent about this a few times, they actually, at expense and per Steve's request, they did an analysis on this.
You
showed
guys are
Steve this
lying to
analysis. He
yourselves.
doesn't believe these things that were said by. I
Read
guess-
the financials. You pay someone 50 grand to do a set of financials, and then you say they're not the truth.
So also,
Let me talk. You've talked for half an hour. Let me just
Steve,
continue.
let's have a civil conversation
I'm
here.
trying to, so stop interrupting me. So, there's a great chance for you to reanalyze that. You've got to cut positions at City Hall.
Which position, Steve?
Give me the list that you're about to appoint. I'll be happy to make some suggestions. It's not fun, but we're talking here wallowing in all of these problems. And you gotta throw some mud on the wall to try and make it stick. Outsource is an option. Sometimes you need to take a department and get it down to its core value and supplement it with outsourcing. My final question is this: when is this budget being voted on?
The June meeting.
It's not on the agenda that I saw.
Was that last year's agenda that you saw that?
I don't know.
Lisa-
I
haven't seen the agenda.
The agenda's posted, and I believe it's the 20th, council number 20 and 21, or.
It just came out, right?
Yeah, I think.
So
it's
it is
20.
on there.
Yeah, 'cause
I
we're-
didn't see that on there.
Because it's the TAN that we're voting on and the budget, so it is on there, it's 20 and 21, I believe.
The $3 million.
Yeah, and it's right.
Tax
it's-
anticipation note?
The budget is right before that or after.
Okay, so it is in June,
Yes.
okay? You can't be giving these big tax bills to these people. They're in the same boat we are. You've got to make some hard decisions. And you can't do it by counting paper clips. I'm sorry. You gotta start with the meat.
Yeah, just note, this is, like I said, the 27th budget meeting internally, externally, the 8th or 9th. I know you've been pretty quiet this entire time. And, obviously, always good for the data. I think that's not accurate about the rowers versus managers. I think as I pulled up here too on just honest conversations about where the budget is and what's driving cost increase, the last
What
few years.
page is that in the workbook?
I don't have a page on this because it's like, we do the page numbers last in the
Oh,
finalization
okay.
piece, so. And your workbook, though, it might be, yours has page numbers, so if you go to city budget overview expenditure breakdown.
That's actually reviewing budget overview, right?
Yes, that's right.
Oh, I think I see it.
So, you look at general government, 3.1 million FY '25 coming
Page
into
19.
FY '27, we're looking at 3.47 million. But, that, over 3 separate budget cycles, that increases by about a third of as much as a single increase in the public safety departments in a single year. So you could try to take down the smallest part of government, or you're talking about police and fire. And I know nobody wants to say that, or they want it to make it seem like you can cut the smallest part of government to save everybody's tax bills without cutting into safety, which I think would be a terrible idea. So either there's not going to be a lot of long-term savings in the biggest parts of government that are growing, or you're going to have to make cuts in those areas, and you're not telling people you're going to.
I don't have any problems making a few cuts in the police department. I mean, they got a fairly good-sized staff of officers and sergeants, but they don't need to be utilizing every police cruiser that we lease, plus the 8 we own. They can rotate 12 vehicles between the 21, and only, or try to, the chief can work it out on the 2 vehicles that can go home, one being the K-9 officer and his cruiser. And that would cut down on maintenance costs, fuel costs, tires, and the chance of liability insurance of accidents, and better utilization of the equipment. And less equipment being utilized, extra equipment we've had to purchase to put in these cruisers. None of the 8 cruisers I asked them about, if any of them were special units, special purpose vehicles. No. So that tells me, it's just a regular standard police cruiser, whether it be a pickup truck or a car. Not used for any kind of special purposes, The chief, the fire chief, I think he'd be pretty tickled pink to just keep the 2 leased pickups he's got, and that poor excuse for a forestry truck, because it wasn't heavy duty enough to carry water in the first place, so. Typically, they've had 1-ton single wheels or 1-ton dual wheels as a forestry truck. And the fire inspector can keep using that, Maybe times will be better off, And unfortunately, when you have employees that are soldiers and they're reservists or guardsmen and they get sent away for deployment, unfortunately, the employer has to maintain their records just like they're here. So they gain their retirement and their sick time and their vacation just like they're here, but you don't pay them unless there's an agreement that, you pay them their 2 weeks vacation that's due to them or something like that in between to help make things up. Because some people in the military and the reserves don't get the big dollar amount. And they have to make ends meet for their wives and kids at home. I was one, got deployed several of times. So, and as far as someone that got injured on the job, yeah, he's there. But, that's why we have, or should have, on-call firemen, reservists. Police departments nowadays really should have reservists, so should firemen. Look at the on-call firemen that fought the fire over there at Robbins Lumber Company. Those people are well-trained and work their butts off. And damage, a lot of equipment gets damaged. And, as for public works, I really don't seem to understand why we need 2 excavators. But then again, some organizations, and I've seen it, think that they gotta have all the toys and balls and whistles. I'd like to really know how many times they've used that fusing machine that I urged the council before I got on the city council not to buy it. Sometimes you say going after the paper clips, Steve, is not the true answer, but if you got this box of paper clips, this box of paper clips, that box of paper clips, this box of paper clips, this pile, that pile, and you put them all together, and it's like, shit, I could get by with just 1 box of paper clips, you know what I mean? And also, I do kind of agree with Steve. You start out with a small department, should start with a small price for a department head. And, you know, but you also have to look at it, it's like, we, that's why I'm saying no giving any taxpayers money to nonprofits. You don't pay somebody this amount and then you pay something else for this amount and call it the same thing.
You know,
And people still are gonna want the best service that we can possibly offer. You know? Be kinda interesting to see how the vote comes out on the school department. I wish them well. I would really like to see the budget pass on the school department. But I don't know how people are gonna vote. I was really surprised that I won.
I would say, thank you for that, Pat. And, you know,
It's not an
oftentimes.
easy job. That's what I'm trying to say. We can all work together and cut things. And sure, there's gonna be a lot of people that are gonna be PO'd. You can't make them all happy, and I have no intentions on making them all happy.
You know, the lease pieces, I know, I was really, especially upon arrival, when I saw that all the police had the leased cars and they take home vehicles. But, you know, and I think I would have opposed that decision when it came forward. I also know that I don't think that's, you know, that when you see some of these areas, it really is in, as part of the huger increases, the solid waste, as we talked about, that'd be a magnitude of, you know, 4x of a savings if we could solve that piece. And honestly, I was looking into this because just I like to double check things on, all right, well, when we did the last negotiation with our unions, which I know Councilor Halloran, you led each of those pieces of those negotiations. You know, we had some pretty big increases. You know, police are up, I think, 9% a year. The previous collective bargaining increase, you know, so over 3 years, it was a 27% increase over that period of time. I think we're up 4 to 6% for this last round of 3 increases. There's also a lot of benefits. We see these benefit changes. Those are contractual obligations that would take opening up those to really get to them. But I was also, you know, double checking these things and, gosh, well, you know, it's a competitive recruiting environment. And like, what's Bangor do? And like, you look at the Bangor job description for a police officer, and all the bells and whistles they're throwing, and this and that, and you know, you just see like they're even offering more generous than ours because it's a really tough thing to recruit for police and fire. And also, I think the issue with cutting those folks, especially, is the morale in those areas that are absolutely key pieces of our organization. And they have the opportunity, if you cut those aspects of police and fire, to, you know, to go to other nearby departments that are, you know, can't find enough people to sign up for those positions, even though they're fairly well paid and they have good equipment and they're offering all these things because they're extremely competitive. The other piece of that is if we create that kind of turnover in the organization, that happens too. We've already invested a ton of money into these organizations and those people. And that level of destabilization, and I know just on the size of government, as if we were going to not do any police and fire and just try to cut salaries, or maybe we could, you know, furlough and shut down City Hall for a couple weeks. Can't do that with police and fire, obviously. But there's just, you know, you look at these numbers, you know, the cost increases are in different areas. It's not going to actually save you the huge money in those places. And I think there's also, I know it's not popular to talk about equity issues, but a big cut to the general government side and not touching police and fire because of, you know, when we looked at the 2025 wage scales, you know, Sarah was the first non-union, or deputy city manager, the first non-union woman on the salary list, or the top of that, at number 28. So if you cut one side and not cut the other, it's effectively a massive decrease to the majority of the women in this organization, who are much less paid than the men on average. So I have some And in a place that's already had like 50% turnover over a 3-year period at a time. So it's just getting back to institutional levels. I think you talked about the rowers versus oarsmen or the steersmen. That's not accurate on hiring. There's an addition of a facilities assistant. That position used to exist in 2019. They went to a contract model. That wasn't working out, so that was a savings. The deputy city manager's position used to exist in 2019. The public works director's position used to exist in 2019. The city was really just backfilling very needed positions in the fastest growing city in Maine. Yes, we added a Parks and Rec director after the Parks and Rec department pre-funded that the previous year to lessen the financial impact. We didn't add any big amounts of people to that department. It's just the Parks and Rec director. And Roddy's out there working too. Every single person that's in management is also plowing.
Isn't he also the facilities director or manager as well?
Manages the facilities department as well. Our clerk is also our tax collector. She just walked into the room. So,
All three of her.
so one of the largest unions in the state of Maine, their head calls Ellsworth the slashers because there are so many people that are just this/this. Our public works director is also the wastewater superintendent. And our tax collector is also the clerk. The city manager is also the finance director right now. These departments are oftentimes departments of one. They are not, they are not big departments with tons of cost savings at that level. So, that is kind of where we're at. Should we get to some of the paper clips, as you've noted, Pat? The final cutting of the paper clips. I'll let you take over. Yep, the calculator. Oh, do I need to? Maybe I'll just leave.
It says I'm sharing. There we go.
So this is after doing one last round with all the departments and one person around looking through everything. We were able to get the city side as a percent increase to get a little bit lower than the schools to 7.65%. A lot lower as a dollar figure because, again, that 12 million in city tax contribution to the 16 million. So even though the percent's a little bit lower, the actual dollar figure is much lower. But if you go down to the budget growth trends, again, the city has been lower as a percent for the school each time. We were much lower last cycle.
Can you clarify which line is which?
The teal line is the city and the top darker
Okay, thank you.
line is the school.
Appreciate that.
I will note that last year, with the lower amount of the city side of the schools, a lot of that was inaccurate revenue forecasting. We had a couple $100,000 getting clawed back, but we also, we're just into the first year of the new budgeting system, and we counted on some prior year actuals in the revenue sharing in the revenues that just didn't come to fruition. So I was always a little bit cautious, and I had noted in meetings that, the city, we hired two firefighters, a police officer, a dispatcher, and to be net 0.4 negative, we had a lot of increased revenue sharing. Some of that was true. There was a big state revenue sharing increase last year. But we're kind of making up for some of that this year. That's what I talked about, that revenues being down 5.9%. That's really on right-sizing the lack of accurate revenue forecasting from the previous year. It's a big part of this, why this jump this year is bigger than the previous year. So, but that's the general trends. If you want to go back down to the distributions, this is kind of where the dollar figures kind of come in. You can see on the municipal side, just shy of 12 million, the school side 16.6 million, the county side up the largest percent, as noted before. Cities and towns across Maine are facing some pretty substantial increases. A big part of that, as we just talked about, was a lot of these huge increases in gas prices this year, huge increases in salt prices, huge increases in health insurance. And we're not the only city that is being faced with a lot of these increases. They keep going down, so we've, to kind of pull under the 8% threshold, detailed. I'm gonna keep coming down actually to the plus minuses.
This is as many as
Oh, you don't have the plus minus?
now. You mean the adjustments?
Yeah, the adjustments, I'm
Okay.
sorry. So fire department got us a bit, and most of these were in like employee appreciation lines, like that's not non-essential. I had something in my budget that was part of my contract, which I didn't ask for, but it was in there, about $2,000 for hospitality to take people and others out to eat and staff, and I did that a lot for fire department this year, but I can live without taking any staff out.
Ashley, can you zoom in so that we can read the adjustment description? Thank you. That's a big help.
Dropping a lot of folks' non-essential training to effectively zero, and kind of all citywide trainings for departments. That's a really hard thing to do because a lot of our staff is so new that are recently in their positions, that having them have some training in those areas would be nice. But we got to cut everything we can to see that could be remotely discretionary. Human resources budget had the most of that. Their legal was a little bit over, because we're also, some of these things we're looking at the year-to-date actuals and being like, okay, the legal isn't nearly as much as we thought it was gonna be. Highway, again, did some kind of true costing on their year-to-dates and rebids. Most of that came in the other way, which we already added to the budget as we were doing the line-by-lines. Their latest rounds of things, they were able to get about 27,000 out. The clerks, about $1,700, and tax, similar things, you can keep going down.
Well, this needs to come out, sorry. That's what it is.
It's a tiny bit in the Public Works Administrative budget. Comms budget, we cut out. We're not gonna do the website upgrade. I think our website is, it's not mobile friendly, it's got a lot of needs, we get a ton of complaints from citizens and customers about the quality of the website and its accessibility and use and information and how to find things. We're gonna need to do that at some period in time, but this wasn't the year. Library, I told them not to do that, but I guess they came in as well with what they could find. The external organizations are at we did put in
Is that 10%?
a 10% cut into the external organizations, nonprofits, considering it was going through every other single department.
That's the commissions as well. You say
yeah.
external, but it's commissions.
Yeah, so,
Yeah, it's everybody.
Yep.
yeah, so there's a cut to the, it's not eliminating it, I know, Pat, which you've, but it did, and I hate to do that. Those folks as well, it's not gonna save the budget here. And they, like general government, have had the least amount of increases. Not the city's contributed to those organizations year by year. It's been effectively flat, at least the 3 years that I've been here.
What percentage of our total budget is what we give to nonprofits and externals?
Well, and I think the name is still misleading, because the commissions are,
I don't know if this is a big
Internal.
word, but when I was in other budget proceedings that I've been in other towns, when you're doing you gotta do a justification, so you want quantifiable results from year to year. They keep asking for more. If they're not giving us more services, better memberships to lower price memberships, discounting the memberships for children, for recreational services, or better bus fees for city residents, giving them a discount,
think
go
a
on
lot-
and
I
on.
think a
You
lot of
have to go,
actually-
you have to go look and push it, quantifiable results. You want the best possible service from the nonprofits that you can get.
Well, they came in and presented us, Pat, and a lot
That
of them talked
wasn't,
about.
no, I listened, I really did. I didn't
And-
see any, you know,
It
the
is-
bus service, yes, I can see that was very valuable, yes. But just because you ask for an amount doesn't mean you're gonna get it.
It is something also interesting because I understand all the external organizations aren't included in this chapter, but there was a third drop, a 30% drop in requests. I think there was like a drop in overall total requests from external organizations from last year, right? Yeah, it was
So we're
considerable.
already giving less, and now we're gonna give 10% less here as well.
Yeah.
See,
And, yeah, particularly because a lot of, like,
And overall, from the subcommittee meeting, from what they requested versus what the subcommittee agreed and brought to council.
Yeah.
And then with this 10%, I think an overall cut from all of the external organizations, was like $80,000 or $90,000 overall from the total asks, is what we cut.
Mr. and Mrs. Ellsworth are perfectly capable of donating their own dollars to their own causes. It doesn't need to be in their tax bill.
but doesn't the town also ask that if you are gonna ask for general assists for any form of assistance, that you would have gone to some of these groups before, so you can better us, so this way, yeah.
Yeah, that's what Tina has been doing, yeah. So she's been
That's-
sending her clients
that's
to
fine.
external organizations before using taxpayers' money that's in the budget, yeah.
That's fine, there's always gonna be the Salvation Army and the rest of them out there. You know what I mean? There's a lot more nonprofits out there that don't even go to municipalities to ask for help. Or ask for you to pay for their services rendered.
I'll just note that communities all around us, all around the state, provide money to nonprofits. You can go to look at any town meeting warrant, any city, other cities. This is not something just Ellsworth does. So I think, obviously, we disagree, Pat, I think these are,
Oh,
I think these are very
we
good.
can
I think this is,
agree to disagree.
yeah, and I just want to note for myself that I think this is a good use of taxpayer dollars because those organizations are assisting Ellsworth residents and they're taking a burden off of the city that we would otherwise potentially have to spend through needing more police officers, needing more fire, so we can disagree. And the fact that we've already reduced it as much as we have from last year, and now we're saying another 10%, I hope some people will see that as we're trying to reduce the tax burden as much as possible on everyone, but I'm not gonna agree to any budget that cuts all our nonprofit spending, and we can disagree on that, and and that is what it is. I think this 10% on top of all the other cuts is, I don't like it, but I wanna find ways to minimize the tax burden as much as possible, so that's my 2 cents.
Well, like I said, Mr. and Mrs. Ellsworth, they're pitching the pennies and trying to make their mortgage payments, pay for their gas, everything else. Those that are retired,
Going down here.
they do pay and donate to whatever causes they want.
There's some open gov contract, which we didn't have for a lot of our digital services, which we noticed wasn't split between the departments yet. The added interest, that was a little bit of the positive. We double-checked all of our revenues. Some of the revenues increased. The fee schedule revenue increases. We also added $10,000 for a recount or a recall. We already spent about $10,000 this year on the additional recount. I know it's not a comfortable topic for probably this council to discuss here, but if there was to be a recall, it would cost money, and we already experienced a recount, which costed money. So I think we just, for the time being, talked to Tina in our elections group. We have to budget that a recall could happen, and it's there, or another recount could happen, and it's there. It's happened once already this last year. Maybe there'll be a time when the city is not facing recalls and recounts of elections. And that could be an under too. If there's a recall, there would be the election for the recall, that would be $10,000, and then there'd be, if those councilors were gone, then we'd have to look at another election that might be able to be aligned with November. Tina from our team is looking into it on if that could happen, but there's some specific natures of the charter if that happened, on how that second election might actually trigger two, so we could be in the position of doing, gosh, in a single year, 1, 2, 3, 6 elections. You can see actually all this stuff in front of you right now. This room is an election site, and so not only do we do 6 elections, but we have to disrupt city business pretty dramatically, not just to prepare for all these elections, but our building itself, in our auditorium, and the city clerk's office area, for early voting for here. Those are, additional costs that have to be borne by the city, and we have to prepare for them as if they're gonna happen. I think it's something we need to look at process-wise. I think it'll be probably an uncomfortable conversation, but I don't think the recall processes anticipate the sort of early voting piece and how that requirement compresses the time frame for turning an election around, to be able to actualize that. So, I'm confident we'll be able to do it without any changes to make it happen and stay in, if it does move forward. There's also another piece on if only 2 city councilors remain. There's not effectively enough councilors to certify an election piece, but I think we'll have to, if the recall does move forward, we'll have to talk as a council to clean up those pieces of the charter so that, if that were to happen, that there could be a process with only 2 councilors remaining that would still be allowed to vote to certify an election, et cetera, so that there'd be a legal new city council seated, or so you don't have to redo the whole charter, ask the state for reincorporation because nobody's allowed to certify or hold a majority in the council anymore. But we'll get to those other process pieces probably later on, but I do think we need to budget an additional $10,000 for a recall or a recount, because we've already experienced a net deficit on those areas. Election rentals, I think Tina found some savings in there. IT professional services went down, they'll hold off on a few things in some of their trainings. Just pretty much everybody's just, unless it's to a core certification, not attending any trainings this year. Some of their capital outlays for some of their minor equipment changes and purchases that weren't like the servers, the things that we absolutely need. That's it. That got us a little bit below the school, but also, and it's kind of a microcosm for, you gather all the paper clips, you get that amount, gets it down about 0.5, 0.7%. But now we need to talk about a fire department need that, will potentially blow that all out of the water. So Scott, I know Scott and I had a conversation. We've got some, I'll let him give some more background, but I originally thought this was just gonna be moving money around, but it looks like it might cost more money, so I'll leave it to the chief to explain.
Before we jump into that, I just have one question. It appears that the consumer price index at the end of April was 3.8%.
3.8.
My question, and I guess it depends on what site you look at, so maybe I'm giving you bad information. My question is, you're sitting at 8% right there. What, do you have that spreadsheet that you could plug that in like you did in years past? What number would get us to 4%, is my question. What,
We can put it in there.
is that a big deal?
What number would get us this to 4%?
If we got the increase to 4%, what's the total of budget amount? There was a spreadsheet last year that,
This is a little different.
it's not available, okay, well, I can figure it out the long way. That's fine, don't mess with it. Don't mess
Nate
with
from IT will be able to give me that. I'll
No,
send
I
you.
can
I'll send you an email
figure
tomorrow.
that out just from that.
Yep, I'll send you an email
That's no
tomorrow.
problem. Sorry, Scott.
Yeah, I'd say, inflation is definitely at 4%. It's one of the tough things. A lot of the things the city uses is not anywhere near 4%. Gas, we use a lot of gas,
Well, I'm
25%. Health
maybe I'm
insurance,
taking
17%. No, the consumer price
She's getting
index
it
is-
there. She's playing the game. $1 million.
And Charlie, last year, the city portion
Put in
was
$1
a
million.
0.4% increase.
Yeah, and you gotta figure this out too, because you've gotta pull down the school's 8%, so that essentially the city budget has to be at 0% in order to pull down the
Right.
schools
Well,
to
she's getting,
4.
yeah.
Actually, you need to go even lower than that, because if you don't require any cuts of the school, yeah, you can't bring down a school 8% for $16 million,
It's a half
by
a million
pulling down
dollars, so
$11
she's
million.
looking at.
It's the top number.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going so quick, I couldn't.
Total, you gotta, if you want the total tax bill.
Yeah, I-
Plus the schools. you
It's
gotta
the
go-
bottom
it's
number.
the bottom
So it's gotta be $1 million.
Bottom number.
Total,
I
just
thought-
total
I
ask.
thought we were doing the top number. Oh, geez.
That's a billion.
That was like 100.
God, I like that number.
I can't,
We just have to cut a
You're at
bill, we
100
just have to
million
cut
now.
$1 million, $100 million,
Yeah,
and
there you
we're-
There you
there you
go.
go.
we'll be fine.
There you go.
Yeah, okay, all right, so.
That would mean
Little
we'd
more
have
than
to be negative 1.33 municipal
The
budget.
city side of the budget will need to be negative 1% in order to pull down the school's 8%, and again, the
And
city
the
side
county.
is 12 million, the school side is 16.6 million. To pull an 8% increase on the school's $16 million by using the short end of the tail.
You answered my question. I just wondered what that number was to get that in line with the CPI increase. That's all. Thank you.
And I'm hoping that it stays there. Like I said, the city's kind of uniquely, for some of these health insurance, gas, salt, steel. Unfortunately, I think cities and towns are like uniquely prone to not a 4% for inflationary items, because we buy so much steel, we buy so much health insurance, we buy so much salt. It's like inflation's a tough thing in these categories. If it was different categories, it might have been that's one of the things I want to look at over long term. Like, are we really going to look at 17% in health insurance inflation costs? Are we really going to be looking at?
We don't need to spend the amount of money on calcium, as far as treating the roads in the wintertime. Calcium should be a no-brainer, cut that right out. Minimum amount of calcium. It's not good for the environment, it's not good for the equipment, it's not good for people's cars.
I think they use the reason it could be wrong, but that when it drops below, too much below freezing, the salt doesn't actually clear the road, so you need the liquid calcium added in so that it can drop the melting temperature even when it's
There's
sub-zero.
another product that Maine DOT uses.
All right, Scott, what do you got for us?
I'd like to say good news and bad news, but, so, when we started this budget cycle, obviously I came to you guys. I took my operational budget and I pretty much put it at all zeros. No increases. The only increases I had were up in the professional services that was related directly to the cost of overtime on the fire department. During this budget cycle, I had one of my employees come back from boot camp and then get told as a reserve member he was being deployed. He is now deployed effective now for the next 400 days. So he's gone.
Where?
Where? Somewhere in the Mideast. I don't know where. So, in the same aspect, I wound up with 2 employees that wound up with non-job related injuries. They're gonna be out for anywhere from 6 to 8 months. So I'm effectively down 3 employees right off the start, going into the new fiscal year. When you equate that to what I have for staff downstairs, that is pretty much an entire shift. And I have another employee that's potentially going out in December for a hip replacement. I run 5 guys per shift when we're at full staff. Lately, we've been, with sick and vacation times, we were averaging 4 per shift. That's our minimum staffing by policy. We don't drop below 4 people. mostly because the ambulance has to have 2 people on it all the time. The engine should have 3 people on it, which is why we run 5 people, but we've been running 2 and 2, just trying to maintain minimum staffing. So in order to cover some of that gap over this period of time, we have 2 temporary full-time employees that are gonna be coming on board. It winds up being a cost neutral when it comes to their base salaries, because the gentleman who's on deployment makes more in the guard than he does here, so it's cost neutral on his salary for the temporary employee that's gonna be coming in. Now, this isn't including a benefit side of things, this is just the base salary. So, this particular firefighter medic makes more than the temporary full-time employee that would be coming in. But we're not paying that paramedic right now while he's deployed. The second individual that's on injury leave, he is actually only being paid 4 hours a week because he has an income protection plan that's in place and/or PFML. So those are covered there also. So we're only paying him 4 hours a week of his salary. So the 2 employees on the base salary side, it's the same as if those 2 people were there. Now, the problem that comes up is we have a discrepancy based on past practice, and they conflict with each other. The problem is in the past, prior to my coming here, we did not give temporary full-time employees part-time benefits. Since I've been here, because the personnel ordinance says part-time employees are eligible for part-time benefits, temporary full-time employees were given the same option because they're actually working more hours than the part-timer is. So this is where, in the past week, the human resource director and I have been having this discussion is, how are we gonna follow this? Because all of a sudden, we got hit with these 3 people being out of work while we were in the middle of a budget process, and this was unbudgeted on the benefit side of things for HR. So now the question is do these temporary full-time employees, do we budget in to this FY27 budget benefits for them? Because they're going to be here a minimum of 6 months. One of them's gonna be here for at least a year. They'll be working the 42-hour work week, the same as everybody else downstairs. They're not part-time employees working less than 35 hours. So this is what the question is as far as the budgeting process is, do we do the benefits for the temporary full-time employees, or do we not do it, and we just work off their base salary where it's a net zero as far as the employees who are not working? So I kind of gave the 2 options in this memo. I apologize for the short notice on this. I apologize for the short notice on the memo. But I got told at 3 o'clock this afternoon I had to come visit you guys. So I really put these 2 options out to you as far as the budgeting process, as to what direction you would like us to take as far as budgeting or not budgeting those benefits.
I have a question, Scott. Excuse me, you have 2 people already in mind, it's,
Correct.
okay. I know in my experience hiring, sometimes people don't need the benefits.
Correct.
So what is your sense of their
I don't know.
personal needs, if they'll need health insurance and stuff?
So we don't know
That
yet.
seems to be the big one.
We don't know yet because we haven't sent the offer letters to them. They've been through the testing process,
Okay,
but she felt we couldn't move forward till we had an answer on this because this is an unbudgeted, the benefit side of things was unbudgeted for FY27. So she was hesitant to have me put out the letters until we had this answer.
So, I haven't had the chance to really like read through this memo. Can we break it down to, so the 2 options are either we don't account for any benefits in the budget because we don't know what, if any, we will pay out,
Correct.
or we just say, we make the assumption that we're gonna pay them, provide these benefits.
Correct.
What's the total number on the benefits?
So what she sent to me when she put all the salaries, would you have 181?
Yeah.
It was
so-
181, I think. when you combine base salary and benefits together for the two employees, one here for 6 months, one here for a year, wound up being 181,000. But
But their salary's covered.
their
right?
salaries and covered, so it'd actually be around 89,
84.
So the
84,000.
net is 84.
The net is 84.5, okay.
Yeah,
And that's maybe, right?
that's a maybe. And I think, my discussions with her is, do we put that in there to cover the maybe?
Is that what, I don't know if you checked the box.
I did not check the box, do you wanna see the
Yeah,
check?
yeah, check it.
So that's 85,000, just the benefits. That's what it would be at.
All right.
Wow, 85,000 has that big a hit. Will you know, Scott, excuse me, before the council meeting, when we're gonna be voting on this?
As soon as I can get the letters out, I would know whether they needed them or not. So, I
Because
mean,
there's the option of splitting the difference, since we don't know, and there are two of them. What would it be with half if we? played
I
the
guess the
odds?
other question is, and I guess this is like option 3, do we fund the full-time, the one that's gonna be here for 12 months, plus fund that one, and the other one is here for 6 months and we not fund that? I don't know if that's gonna put us in a predicament where we're funding one and not funding the other, based on duration of time on their assignment.
So I'm looking across the chart at the benefits, and some of these aren't optional. I
Correct.
assume SS is social security, or is it something, the equivalent? What is SS?
Yeah,
in
you're,
this case?
no, that's social security, that's part of that FICA,
Medicare, so
all the
we don't
FICA
have
stuff.
choices on that, or
Right.
paid medical leave. I don't know what RHS is.
That's retirement health, so
So the only variable is the health insurance.
I'd question the retirement health because they're not eligible for state retirement as temporary employees. So RHS is part of their main retirement system. PFML, that's required through state. HRA, it's part of the health retirement. They get a reimbursement account, that's part of their health benefits.
So if they didn't get health benefits, they wouldn't get HRA.
Correct, correct.
Yeah.
I can't fathom having a full-time firefighter and not have health insurance. So again, I don't know how you budget when we don't know, but
And like I said, I don't know what their needs are until I
Right.
give them an offer letter and we bring them in the door. I can't give that number. So, that's the big gap question is, what do we do going for FY '27? Do we budget and plan for it? Or do we wind up in a shortfall because now they need it? Or do we just not fund it and not offer it?
And then you're just down 2 staff.
Well, I
Well,
mean,
not fund the
the staff
benefits
would
either.
still be here, they just wouldn't be, they wouldn't be funded their health, the part-time benefits, the health insurance and stuff like that. So, the city would still be responsible as the city's share of the required benefits.
Social Security and
Yes.
family medical
Yeah.
leave. and-
Yep.
Could we back up just a little bit? Am I hearing that there's a pool of people that are available for such a situation?
So every year, the fire department, even if we don't have an opening, the fire department always does annual testing, a hiring process, so that we have a pool of applicants in case we have sudden need openings that are gonna be long-term. It's kind of our way of protecting ourselves because we struggle so hard, just like every other department throughout the state, we struggle with hiring. We had this hiring process and only two people were eligible to even go through the testing process. Now, I think we had 8 applications, but only 2 were qualified. We still tested them and everything, but this is something we do every year, every spring, so that if something like this arises, and we utilized this last year. Last year, we hired 2 temporary employees, and part of that hiring process that happened for FY '26, those people transferred over into those open slots, because they had already been tested and vetted through the process. So we try to make sure that every year we have a list established of eligible applicants, so we don't have to go through this cycle every time there's an open of trying to run applications and testing.
And the 2 you did last year,
Correct?
what was the benefit situation there?
So they both were offered benefits. One came in as a part-time employee, and the other one came in as a temporary full-time employee. And both of them were offered part-time benefits when they came in.
And is that what you're considering? So would these positions, you may have said this, but would they both get part-time benefits?
Correct.
Okay, so this number we're looking at is if they both receive part-time benefits?
Correct.
Okay, and that's our past practice?
It has been over the past few years, yes. Now, like I said, I've gone back to previous to me, which is 5 years, and they had brought temporary full-time people in and did not offer them benefits. The contract doesn't stipulate it. It's not, that part's not covered in the contract. I've been through it with a fine-tooth comb. I've also been through the personnel manual, and the temporary full-time employee is the one position in the entire personnel manual that is not recognized in terms of benefits. The part-time employee is, a full-time employee is, but that intermediate step of temporary full-time is not addressed as to what they're offered or what they're capable of receiving through the city. So, like you said, over the past couple of years, we have offered them the part-time benefits. It just made, from our perspective, it made sense.
What if one of these guys or gals gets hurt while working for the city and they don't have insurance?
I mean, they're still, if they get hurt while they're on the job, they're still covered by the city's policy, yeah.
Yep.
So,
If they get hurt at home, that's on their dime.
correct. So again, the reason why I'm here tonight is just, overall, I think between myself and HR, we just need to know how we want to move forward with the budget. And as far as, do you want us to fund that budget line and increase her budget line that covers the expenses for these 2 people?
Can you cut elsewhere in your budget to cover it?
I have literally cut down, even right down to this last exercise here this morning. I cut an additional $2,000 out of my budget from the operational side of things. I've zeroed out lines. I've zeroed out lines, and I was budget neutral going across everything. You look at my budget, you'll see they were all zeros. The only increase on my operational line was the fuel expense line, which was increased when all the other departments' lines were increased.
And are there any other employees that don't have these benefits?
No.
Yeah.
All full-time employees are offered these benefits. My part-time employees are offered part-time benefits, and my volunteers, they're pay-per-call. So they're not afforded any other benefits.
I would just note, I think this is, like I said, a microcosm for the budget as a whole in terms of, just saw, 12 different departments in general government try to cut every single thing we possibly could so that we could pull back some of the increases to get under the school's increase. There's an incredible amount of paperclip looking that went into that, and one staff shift in public safety and paying for benefits on part-time employees blows that entire exercise out, and we're back over. I'd also note that, this guy's absolutely right. He didn't ask for anything new. It's really just, this is the true costing of what this department, we had a lot of half firefighters at it, and even without this, the fire department is up $309,000 from the previous year. That's just the current, that's the collective bargaining increases that were negotiated. That's
And the
current
true cost of overtime.
The true cost of overtime, the true cost of that's not adding new firefighters, the fire department is up $300,000. And this is gonna be, you know, an additional amount for these part-time, you know, if I'm gonna try to cover that to get back below, it's gonna have to be, cost of living adjustments for general government. I can't touch a collective bargaining, so I can't decrease the salaries of any of the unions, it's police, fire, highway, clerks, not that there's a lot of money in the clerk's office even, I wanted to get that union piece, so that just really, it kind of shows how difficult this piece is. If there's even a small change in the fire department, or some of these other departments, the magnitude of the cuts you have to make on general government, and that cost of living increase for the employees that are already here, to drop it, but they're already below their union counterparts. Again, that is a cut on the predominantly female portion of the workforce, to make up for a cost increase on employees who,
Yeah. And I will say, right now, we are holding all the shifts. We're not allowing them to bring in overtime, to bring them up above minimum staffing. We're supposed to be at 5 per shift. That's what council authorized the fire department to be at, was 5 per shift. Minimum staffing by policy is 4. If there's been vacancies and they're still at 4, then we don't bring back overtime. But right now, we've got too many employees out now, long-term, that's not a reality anymore. I've got to be able to get these shifts to at least 4.
So, one question that I have, and probably you don't have this answer, but I just thought it might shed a little light. Last year's budget, we're 11 months into a 12-month budget. Where do you stand now in your budget? Are you over budget, under budget? Where do you stay, or do you have that answer?
Actually, I just went through, I'm going to be budget positive this year.
What is budget positive?
So I'm not, even though if you take a look right now at all my lines, there are lines that are in the negative, but when you balance out my entire budget, I'm actually going to be on the plus side. I'm not going to be in the red.
So, I guess in simple terms, because I'm a simple guy, if your budget was $1,000 of expenditures, okay, it looks like this year your expenditures would be $995. Is that, I mean, I'm just
That's
trying.
fair. That's fair.
I'm just trying to figure out negative, positive
Yeah.
things. So there's not a huge surplus, it doesn't look like, that you have from last year.
No, this year, while I am going to be positive, I am one failure away from being on the
Okay,
wrong
all right.
side.
That was where I was going. I just wondered how close credit to you and your department for hitting it so close. And the reason I asked that question is, okay, is the practice been that you come in 50 grand under? So is there 50 grand there that we might find or something? But that's the only reason I'm
I
trying to
mean,
get to that.
I guess, and I'll let the city manager address this too, I mean, based on what I have remaining, is it something that can be encumbered? But we can't encumber, obviously, full-time salaries.
So 2 problems with this. One is charter related. The other one is fire department was over last year.
Correct.
Yeah, so the fire department was over, the police, and previous years we had this was an audit finding, multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars over in public safety cost overruns on departments that, they weren't up to date in the audits, and that's one of the big changes we made this year was if you're gonna go over, you're gonna come in front of city council, we're gonna do it in the time that it happens, and you have to, by the charter, transfer money from another department. We've done that a couple times thus far. It looks like, to your point, I do have the exact figures here to date. It's $2,387,891 as of, I think, 2 days ago. You got $2,643,000 is the full budget. But as you noted, there's gonna be a few more things that hit there, and you'll probably come in just level. We think the police might be a bit over, You know, so that might have to, we can close out the year's budgets. This is the first problem, is there's gonna be overages potentially on the police, and a couple other areas that are very, very small, but it seems like that piece, so we kind of need to keep that so you can close out the budgets. And what we're gonna, you know, that's a big change for our finance teams is, you know, we want to live to these audit findings and make sure that never happens again. So we're gonna need that if you have 50,000 spare. The second problem is, you can't encumber operational
Salaries.
costs like this. Capital is the only thing that's allowed to be encumbered in the budget, so that, per the charter. So even if there was, you know, you can transfer it within the budget year to line out another department, but we can't say, let's just I think it's actually a mistake from previous years on, like, it's one of the budget problems this year. We pre-funded Parks and Rec, you know, by 49,000 in the previous fiscal cycle. We half funded the Parks and Rec director this year, but it wasn't until we were realizing, like, okay, we can't carry over the 49,000 that was put into the general fund for Parks and Rec director in FY '25 into FY '26. We got a little lucky because there was some staff turnover in the facilities area, and we took a long time to kind of get the new director on board, so it kind of worked out that we could pay the Parks and Rec salary with some of those overruns, but you can't do that here.
Just for clarity, I wasn't suggesting any encumbrance.
No, no.
What I was thinking is simply, how tight has your budget been in the last few years? And it looks like it's right on the crest there, so we don't dare gamble here,
Right.
Yeah,
is what I was.
Yeah.
I agree.
I will admit 100%, prior to this year, it's been extremely difficult. We had a lot of things happen over the past several years. This year really tightened down and been, you know, very, very strict about a lot of things this year. Uncomfortably strict, but it had to happen. And the same thing with the FY '27 budget. It's not the budget that I wanted, but it's what had to happen.
Yeah, that's why that $300,000 over the previous year, it's really just true costing the group that's down there. Now, granted, they've been adding 2 a year, the overtimes, and actually, we've been talking with the team about, like, we might need to look into some longer-term analysis of, you know, would hiring more to reduce the overtimes, because you look in these budgets on the overtimes, you know, that's 174,000 in payroll overtime, 160,000 overtime sick, 156,000 in OT vacation, 67,000 OT holiday, 50,000 OT training. So that's a lot of the time. Can you work on the overtime? Same thing in the police, has a similar heavy level of overtime. And a lot of the stuff is built into the contracts on overtime on non-worked hours, meaning like you take 3 6 days, you put on a shift when you get back. Well, those days were counted as worked. So now you're on a shift and that's an OT time. But those are in the collective bargaining agreements, and they're not, unless they were modified, they're not changeable, which is what makes, but if we hired more and like, maybe we could work on that overtime, so we wouldn't have to, when people go on sick, when they're on vacation or this happens, you wouldn't have to have as much, but we're not gonna be able to come up with a true plan. As I've noted too, we've hired a lot more people in the fire department, we've hired a lot more people in the police department, and the overtime lines have not been going down the last 3 to 5 years, so it's, when you add an officer too, that the addition itself creates more overtime, so we really gotta analyze how to figure that out over the long term, and if there is a hire more to have less overtime and have it be budget neutral option.
Well, I think in this situation, as much as I don't like seeing that number go up, I don't think it would be prudent, fiscally responsible for us to, I mean, I don't know if we're gonna offer, and if we've been offering folks in these positions the last 5 years health benefits, and then not do it here because it, you know, I understand it's,
Because they come in under the wire.
because they come in under the wire. I think the right thing to do, in my opinion, is account for those benefits in the budget. And as much as I hate it, and as much as it, you know, flies in the face of all the work you guys have been doing, I don't feel comfortable making it's up to you. I mean, if these guys come in the next 2 weeks and they don't, for whatever reason, they don't need benefits, then we can account for it. But I think as of right now, we should budget for it and it is what it is.
I-
Unless we're gonna say, no, we can't hire these guys at all, and then, then that's and I don't think unless anyone here wants to say that, then I think this is the way we gotta do it.
I want to add to that, they're called temporary, but this is 6 months and 12 months. This means that these people are going to be quitting jobs to come take these jobs, and they need to be, health insurance is just a basic. The other thing, I guess, is a question to you, Charlie. We know that this percentage increase is one part of the formula that determines property taxes and what happens with them. And how close are we to knowing, there's two parts of the valuation increases. One is existing, which is where we've got the contractors, like how much is each person's house gonna go up? But do you have a sense, you've been talking about the valuation increase for new construction that will be coming online to help absorb some of these increases? Because that doesn't yet mean the increase to property taxes. That's
just the levy of
a piece.
both the school, the county, and the city's
Right.
cost. And again, there will be a valuation change. I've been told it could be 3% just across the board, not targeting specific areas. I've been burned when I've said 5% across the board, and it ended up being 31% for here and 18. And as we've
Right.
noted before, the city council and the city manager have no control over those determinations.
But what about the new valuations that you've been talking about?
New valuations is different. I did do
Right.
a study of all of the permits in Ellsworth going back to the late 90s. It was a big enough data set that you could kind of analyze permits by type, growth, valuation. And then, in all transparency, I used a couple different AI tools to run regressionary models on growth in the city over that time, because it was a large enough longitudinal data set to analyze all the new growth, to be like, hey, how much new, not just valuation, but the new, and that was about, when you do a 4-year moving average, you're looking at $500,000 on, when that Hilton Home to Suites, that's 20 million plus, I think, property, that's gonna produce a lot of new tax revenues, but it's not 100%. The assessment cuts off on April 1st, so, how the assessors are gonna value that new hotel and the taxes we need to commit for it, and maybe they put it at 70%, and it's $13 million. Maybe they put it at
Okay, so
25%.
it's not at occupancy, it's the percentage on April 1st.
Yeah, it's the percentage on April 1st, so that's.
So, sorry, but as we're struggling, looking at that number, just to remember, that's not how much property taxes are gonna go up. That's the increase in the budget through all of these conversations, but
Yep.
the valuations,
And this is,
This is-
again, with a big hedge, it is a regressionary analysis. So regressions basically look at past growth and try to predict
Right.
futures. And it's a big enough data set where I feel like a decent confidence interval, it's about $500,000 each year in just new, and this is, actually had an original version of this boom and gloom, which was $500,000, and wow, like what cities would kill for this much? If they're building 50 new houses and new hotels and new this and new that, that doesn't cover the public safety increase in a single year.
but I need you to back up. You're not talking a $500,000 increase in valuation, you're talking an increase of $500,000 of property taxes paid by the new properties.
Correct, the expansion of the tax base on new residential,
So-
commercial growth, that's $500,000.
If
So
we-
you can put in.
I
so-
was just gonna say, can we plug that in, and knowing that this is theoretical, but that there's some logic to it, it's not pulling it out of your hat. That if that $500,000 in additional property taxes paid by new properties, look at that.
Oh, wow.
Make that happen, Charlie.
It's also the importance of keeping the gas on economic development, because
Right.
you have that. And if you don't keep that going and you get into a Millinocket situation, you got no your only option at that point is to crank the tax rates on the people who are already
Right.
there to maintain services, or massively cut services, which creates a vicious cycle of
Then you have
economic decline.
Millinocket and East Millinocket have no business and all kinds of cheap housing.
Well, they're coming back around, but it's been a long haul.
Go to
They're not
go to
where they
Old
were,
Town.
that's
Old
for
Town's
sure.
another example of
Old
something.
Town is
Yeah.
another example.
You go to that
Mill
downtown.
closed. all kinds of cheap housing.
I went to Merida, the Maine
Oh, yeah.
Real Estate Development Association, had a breakfast this morning in Bangor, and the state economist was there and talking about general trends. And long story short, the thing is, hey, if you want economic development and growth, you need to develop housing, and it's just all the stuff that we're working on. To your point, Charlie, it's that if we want to grow the tax base, we need economic development, we need these projects we're working on to bring in more housing, to have the people that they can then afford to live here and work here, then have enough staff to staff these businesses so they move here and have that cycle of economic development. So it's a little somewhat tangential to this conversation, but I agree with you.
Well, it's in line with it.
It's in line with it.
And
But again, I think, go ahead, sorry, Miranda.
I believe the school superintendent also stressed enrollment was down, so if people could stay here
Yep.
and be able to enroll their kids, that would also help the school budget
Yep.
without the state doing its reformulation. So everything here is interconnected, so we,
And if you're done, I want to make sure, Ashley, because I can't read the labels on the numbers. The numbers are great, lovely, big. 3.99 is what, with that 500,000, is the municipal impact. Below that is municipal, county, and school, so that would be the overall increase. And again, that's only with the $500,000 increase valuation. And we have no control over the
No, and again, I think there's a
roller
4 or
coaster of
5 year
increased values.
moving average on the
Yeah.
regression. So, but sometimes less, sometimes more. Last year's a really unique example. Larry and I were just talking about this. Versant built a $55 million substation that added $500,000 in taxes from that one property last year. $500,000 from a single property. And that's like a substation. It's not like some brand new business. But you have enough housing growth, you have,
Right.
we got, what did they just have, an announcement that doing a $6 million, they just bought the main mill mall for, and they're reinvesting in that. At some point in time, that'll probably be worth a
Yeah,
lot of
they
money.
just
That's-
repaid that.
So that'll be more valuation growth, the new Dysarts, 2 new tractor dealerships. One seems to be almost fully complete, the other one seems to be somewhat in development. We've got hundreds and hundreds of housing units online to move forward, but we're still trying to get them over the line, and to help potentially with future credit enhancement agreements, because that's the secret sauce, is if you can get that housing growth, not just for your property tax base increase, but so people can afford to live here. And one of the other gloom parts of Ellsworth is those, the 9,000 residents that live here, and a pretty substantial commercial tax base, I should say. So it's not, so that's very helpful. But the gloom piece is you got, thousands and thousands of people coming here every day to go to work, myself included, that I'm using your roads, I'm using all your infrastructure, and then you got 4 million tourists that are driving down the Bayside Road, and, that's not even a built road. It was never meant for any of that type of thing. So you have this, like,
Can we put toll booths up?
yeah, it's just this piece of like how much
You can work them.
it has to.
Parking kiosks.
It's
No
it's
ticking,
tough.
no laundry.
Yeah,
You
welcome
don't
to
pay, you
Ellsworth.
don't go. Yeah.
So when do you anticipate that we'll know the total valuation with the updates?
When we get our tax bill.
Day before.
Yeah.
I know,
Why not? That's almost realistic, yeah.
Well, we're trying to make that not happen anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll get you.
And
I
you-
don't have that
And I'm
offhand,
pretty
but-
sure,
So-
they're working very hard to make sure it doesn't happen.
Right.
Oh, yeah, no, that's clear.
By July 1st, I can say, but
But it won't be by the council meeting, I guess, that's when we'll know what those numbers are gonna be.
no, I don't think it'll be by the council meeting.
Can there
like
be
to.
an estimate so we know what we're doing? Like
Of the new valuation increase, I can look into some of those questions. We have a check-in, I think, on Monday.
He's
with-
asked them to provide that.
Okay,
The request has gone to the contract.
great. So we'll.
Ask again, really.
can you do it in bold, italic, underline? Tell them we said hi and we'd like this information. But again, the whole concept though of the increases that we're looking at, so much of it beyond our control because of the contracts and necessary increases. But the valuation is the other piece, and that's to your point about we're investing in making it so people do build stuff here. And to be able to see that, as we're making the final decision is gonna be helpful.
Good conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, this has been really
Yeah, I'm
good.
sorry. Amy's so much better than me. I feel she's like such a good PowerPoint and the general piece, and I'm just like such a data nerd and memos and super deep dives into things that I find
No, don't
interesting.
apologize, it's good.
As someone who studied as an engineer, that approach is not a bad thing. Everyone has their own strengths.
Yeah, and I'm tired. I've just,
Yeah.
I've been doing a lot lately that was not anticipated. Just not having a finance structure, but all the other fun things that have been dropping on my plate lately.
Yeah,
So.
that's why they call it work.
I
So
love this
this-
It's
stuff.
not it's not supposed to be all that fun. One old shop foreman I used to work for, he said, stop acting so happy, we'll have to cut your pay.
Well,
I
say
like
if they-
working here.
If it was fun, you'd have to pay admission. So there's no other department heads coming to talk with us? That was on the agenda?
No, just Scott. Everybody else.
No, I
And I
have
realize
the
you
biggest
didn't,
bad news.
I
Oh, wait a
realize
minute.
you did not set
So
out to
you're-
do that.
You're the department head.
Although I should note, I know Steve or Pat, like, what were your thoughts on the fire department's piece?
Say it again?
What were your thoughts on the fire department's, the part-time benefits or no benefits?
My feeling is basically the feeling that you need to go in planning for the worst. And beyond that, it's a great time to think about, those people may never leave here.
Say that again.
Those people may never leave here. They may become permanent
Oh,
fixtures.
correct.
Yeah.
So I think,
You know, and that's, you know, anybody who's worked with me, if you're a volunteer here, you're a part-time employee, you're a temporary full-time employee, you're as valuable to me as my career staff is downstairs, because at any given opportunity, I can turn that switch on, and you're the next person that's on the floor on a permanent basis, you know, and giving the city 25 years of their time. And most of these guys downstairs, unless we push them out the door, they're not looking to go anywhere else. They came here because they wanted to be here. We had people leave the city of Bangor to come here to be full-time employees. So, I mean, it's one of those rare things where, you know, they're vested, you know, as long as we treat them correctly, they're vested for 25 years. So, you know, volunteer, part-time, temporary, full-time, they're valuable to me. Every minute that they give me, they're valuable.
And I think health insurance from the start is how to honor that.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's an investment. I mean, even if they don't stay with me, you know, or they revert back down to part-time, you know, I think it's us investing in them because they're gonna invest their time into us. I mean, they're not making, you know, they're not making, I mean, I guess when you average it out, they're not making really a ton of money. I mean, they have a very good schedule. I mean, they work 2 days a week. But it's not like they're, you know, my employees aren't making $100,000 a year. They're getting close because of the overtime that's there, which is what we're trying to remedy. But on the grand scheme of things, I mean, they get paid well for what they do, but they're not out, you know, they're here to make a living, they enjoy what they do, and, you know, my job is to make sure they have what they need from the day they walk through the door.
Well, these are the folks, if my car flips over and I need someone to save my life, these are the folks that are doing that, so we gotta treat them right.
I think I'll put that into the final.
Sorry, Charlie.
No, as I said, you know, I think it's important to talk about where the costs are. We just saw it. I think that's what I said. This is a microcosm. You had that amount of benefits to these two folks come in, I think it's the right thing to do, to all the points you made about having the fire department, and like, to make up for that, to get it lower, we'd have to cut pretty much every non-union employee's salary or cost of living entirely, in order to make up for that, just that addition, which would obviously have a pretty dramatic effect on morale in the organization, but, these are the types of pieces where if you're trying to cover these increases with the smaller side of the city government, that's like the pressures for me, it's not in there. But it seems like there's, obviously we don't have the full council here, we'll pencil this one in, and any other piece, if a councilor wants to take this out, we're gonna put it in, Ashley will send around the change logs. If a councilor, just let us know, and then you'll have to vote at that at the meeting to take out that line item. If there's a majority of the council would like to do that, they can. Seems, again, we're trying to read the tea leaves, put the changes in here, but councils do have that option at the final budget meeting. To your point on next steps with the commitment as well, we'll get some follow-up on what that would be. We have the school budget validation vote on this coming Tuesday, so, if that doesn't move through, that would essentially pause this project entirely, and then we are gonna have to go back to the drawing board. Not just from the school side, but of course I would have to say the city side as well. I think that would be, we would have to do that. We wouldn't have to, I guess you should say, but I think we would want to. So we'll kind of see on that piece, that might dictate that portion of the meeting. Then there's the commitment, we'll try to get some of the answers on if we do have like the new valuation on new businesses, new commercial development, new residential development, and how much additional tax revenue that might kick off. And then the budget resolutions meeting in June. And then, we're gonna try to get that, now the commitment will, once it's finalized in the valuation pieces, we're also gonna send out a lot of notifications of here's the assessed value changes. So people have a little bit of advance notice this time around, that the valuation changes have happened, and this is what your valuation change has been, and then getting the commitment done, the taxes sent out, and then starting the new fiscal cycle. And honestly, with the new finance director coming in, really working on the reconciliation, a lot of the blocking and tackling. I know there's a lot of other noise out there right now, but I know the city staff is really laser focused on doing very difficult jobs, and coming to work today and every day doing amazing things for the city of Ellsworth. They're an incredible, hardworking group of people to be with. I'm very fortunate, even though this process has been long. It's also gotten to let me get to know all these groups from a very micro level, and any city manager that has had to do this 3 times in a row, probably not too typical, especially for a city of our size, I do that, but it's, thank you to the team, thank you to the council for all these workshops.
I have one last weird question for the chief. Why are we paying health insurance on a man or a person who is deployed?
We're not.
So where's, how come that savings isn't shown? Sorry, we were almost out the door.
No,
but-
no, you're fine, you bring up a good question. That wasn't, with the information that was relayed to us, that wasn't really portrayed in that part of it.
Oh,
But
okay.
you are correct, so with that particular individual, during his, well, he was already that way anyways, but, so, like we said, his salary right now isn't being paid. But he wasn't participating in benefits because he's already a TRICARE member.
Oh.
So he wasn't collecting.
I was really hoping that we could just shift that cost over to one of
So
the
there
other
was-
new
there
people.
was ne- there
I
was
really
never-
tried to get
Yeah,
25
no,
grand.
she and I actually did have that discussion because we were talking about it, because I was looking also, is one gonna offset the other, but,
Right,
when he went on the TRICARE, that no longer became a budgeted portion on his fringe side.
They
I tried.
started offering, I think it was like 2006, no, I think it was 2004, to continue on for guardsmen and reservists, you use TRICARE. You got deployed, you went,
cool.
and what happens is your employer manages your sick time, vacation time, just like you're there. Your salary, if that goes up every year, you get a raise every year, and your sick time and vacation time accrues. But everything else, you're,
Yeah.
but you can also option to have your health insurance and life insurance be suspended until you come back.
All right, I learned a lot about that
It's
subject.
kind
It's
of
helpful.
pretty thick, but that's the summary of a book that's about this thick.
Good deal, good deal.
All right.